Good job.
Hey everybody, my name is David L. Craddock, and I am the author of Shovel Knight, the book, to be published soon by Boss Fight Books. And this book is a narrative-style account of how Shovel Knight, the game, was made. I've spent the past few months talking with the guys you see here, the principal co-founders and developers of the game from Yacht Club Games. And one thing I learned really quickly was how important the team dynamic was in shaping this game's look, feel, personality, and sound. So we thought it would be fun to do a video interview with the whole team and kind of give everyone, our soon-to-be readers, some insight into the dynamics. So if you guys just want to go around and introduce yourselves, tell everybody a little bit about what you do, and then I'll throw some questions at you.
Sure. My name is Nick Wozniak. Most people call me Woz. I do animation and pixel art and stuff.
And I'm Sean Velasco, and I do game design and direction and other stuff.
I'm David D'Angelo. I do programming and other stuff.
My name's Ian Flood, and I'm a programmer.
And other stuff.
I do other stuff.
Nice.
Sure.
Sometimes you'll say Twitter. It's like you're like programming and Twitter.
Don't put that on my tombstone.
Add that bullet point down on the resume. This room looks awesome. Tell me a little bit about where we are right now.
Oh yeah.
This is our office. The room we're in right now is basically our break room, but we use it for like streaming and that kind of things when we need a video on a bunch of people.
Although our previous office was about just this room size only, like, without windows or anything else. It was just wall-to-wall
Big
walls,
cement box.
and we had a desk there, and there. Probably even a little bit smaller than this, and that's where we worked out of for like
most of Shovel Knight.
Most of original Shovel Knight for sure.
Yeah.
And no windows, right?
That's like all our stuff in the background, like all our collections of games.
Nintendo powers and N64 games and cool LCD
awesome.
Tiger Electronics. The works.
And the previous office had no windows. Is that right, or very few?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
That's definitely right.
Yeah.
So by
upgrade.
by the time people see this, it'll be summer, and Specter of Torment and Treasure Trove Edition will have been out for a few months, but I imagine you guys are still winding down. What have you been up to the past few weeks since release?
I guess the release hasn't finished yet. Like, that's the thing. Like, even though it's like it's available on Switch right now, like as of time of me saying the sentence, but we have so many platforms and versions and different SKUs of the game that releasing an update takes multiple months just to get paperwork, testing, and everything out the door. And so we're still doing that. And even once it's all done, we'll probably have to like still monitor support and see if there's any last minute fixes or anything else that needs to be done. So I don't know. It feels like submitting a game is never really there's never really like a ramping down on it kind of thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'd say I'm ramping down.
Hey,
I definitely am ramping down. So like I'm starting to think about the next project and what that's going to be and what our next steps are. Like we've been having meetings over the last couple of weeks about what our 5-year plan looks like, what kind of people we'd want to bring on, and kind of like what kind of games we're going to be making and what we're going to be doing. So while we're getting everything wrapped up, we're also trying to think toward the rest of this year and then like far into the future also. But yeah, I mean, we still have a lot of platforms to ship out, so it's kind of like stepping from that old project into the new project, I guess. But we're not quite there yet.
I'm looking. I played Shovel Knight in several permutations across several platforms, but I thought it was cool that Specter of Torment launched on Switch first. That game just kind of feels at home on Nintendo hardware.
Yeah, sort of since the beginning, right? Like we launched first on Wii U and 3DS for the original campaign, and the heart of Shovel Knight is 8-bit NES. That's where the palette comes from. It's where a lot of the design choices come from, and so we're all Nintendo at heart, and so it makes sense for us to put it on Nintendo first.
So I've had a lot of fun talking with you guys over the past few months about how Shovel Knight was made. It's one of my favorite games in recent memory, and I wondered, was having someone eventually write a book about this game something you guys had considered, or did my request for interviews kind of come out of the blue?
We were like, okay, we want to get a book written about us. What's the best way to do this? Let's definitely make a video game.
Step one.
A lot of people like this.
Yeah. An NES video game would probably be the best way to get that done. No, I would say it's definitely wasn't something we were thinking about. But at the same time, we put a big emphasis on like having our development process and everything we're doing be open to the public and something like that's pedagogical in a sense.
And like not only is it like documented, but it's like a part of our marketing. It's like we'll talk about our design or our process or about what we're doing as hopefully as a way to get our name out there as well. So even though we didn't ask for a book, I would say it's like right in line with what our hopes would be.
Also, we're far along enough on the project that I'm beginning to forget what happened. And so it's like it was a great timing because this really helped make sure that we get everything down in writing before it all gets disappeared into our brains.
After a lot of the interviews, I was thinking about my answers, going, man, did they really happen that way? Like, does the timeline actually work out? That
whenever
way?
anybody cites a date, I'm like, if you say so. Right.
It seems like I tend to write about older games. Shovel Knight is one of the more recent I've written about. And I know when I talked to the Blizzard North guys about Diablo, I asked, well, what are you looking forward to from this book? And they're like, seeing what everyone else said, because I don't know if I'm completely making things up here.
Finally getting the full story. Yeah,
that's right.
There's, we've all been like in the Shovel Knight world for a while, so I guess it didn't. It's all like still tightly compacted here, but I don't know what it would be like to reach back to something like Diablo or something.
It doesn't feel like Shovel Knight doesn't feel like it's over. I don't feel like I'm reflecting on it because we're still in the middle of it. Right. It's been a long time.
So I think fans of your game know how much Nintendo NES classics like Mega Man, Zelda 2, and Mario 3 influenced Shovel Knight's design, but I wonder if you guys could talk about some of your other favorite games from childhood that might have maybe not creeped in and also had an impact on Shovel Knight. As an example, I was kind of surprised that a lot of people go, oh, pogoing, like DuckTales, but David told me early on that actually was not DuckTales, that was the downward stab from Zelda 2 mostly.
That's
right.
I think a lot of us hadn't actually played DuckTales up until Shovel Knight was already.
Fun fact, DuckTales is the first game I ever beat.
That's awesome.
That, or at least I have a memory of beating when I was like 6.
I hadn't played DuckTales though for up until I was much later as an adult.
I mean, it's tough. It's not. I guess when I'm thinking about like NES games, I'm usually thinking about them in like large swaths. Like I had a bunch of my family is pretty large. We had a bunch of kids, and we had a bunch of NES games from like garage sales and everything like that because we were pretty like late to the party on NES. I'm sure that was like we started collecting those cartridges well after Super Nintendo was already like out and everyone was getting rid of the old stuff. So I just remember playing like lots of games all at once. And so I think for me, I'm more just thinking about like if I'm thinking of a particular effect or like a boss or a pattern, it's not usually from a game. It's just like what I remember like collectively an NES game being more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like you start to develop a feeling or like an intuition of how something should be. It's like this is what an explosion on NES should look like. Like it can't have all the frames on and off all at the same time because it can't support that many sprites on screen. So it's like popcorny, right? Or it's like you'll have things like flashing in and out. Like you won't have a big boss on a background because like that didn't exist, and like it just for some reason it's like it just looks right that it's on a black background, and that ends up being in like that's in like Blaster Master and Mega Man and Ninja Gaiden and Fester's Quest and like everything, right? Yeah. So it's like if you played those games, then I think you start to build like a consensus of like what something should be in your mind, and then I don't know, like when we're in the middle of designing this stuff, that's what I would think back to, like, oh well, what's like an annoying like bird enemy that you fought in a game, and it's like, well, there's like a Ninja Gaiden
every game,
Respawn Eagle, Castlevania annoying bird. It's like even like the bats in Zelda 1 are like kind of like that, right? And so I think having that having that big knowledge of a lot of games was really instructive as well. Like when people point out specific things, sometimes they'll say things that they're like, oh, this is just like Wonder Boy. This is just like Wonder Boy 4, a game that I'd like never even heard of.
Right. Very specific.
It's like, is King Knight's confetti from Crystalis? And it's like, no.
It's all from whatever you want.
Right. But that kind of works because when you're playing it it feels like there are nods to maybe some games that you really loved growing up, even though that wasn't like necessarily the intention so much as the style.
It's not unique that we have this knowledge, this big knowledge of NES games. It's like a thing that a lot of us share, and so it's a common vocabulary that we can kind of make our game in.
I think that's what is interesting to me about Shovel Knight, and this is something I'm working on the chapter right now where I point out that Shovel Knight looks like an NES game, which kind of sets it apart from other indie retro-style games, because those feel like retro games, but you can't exactly place them. Like, they're pixel art, but it could be PlayStation, it could be Super Nintendo. Shovel Knight very clearly evokes NES.
Yeah, that was the goal from the beginning. We set the palette to be as much NES as possible. It's got a few extra colors like we mentioned, but for the most part, the NES was like the driving design of the aesthetic, at least.
Yeah, I guess because of like Mega Man 9 and 10 proved that you could do something like that. Like, you could have something that actually looked really authentic.
Yeah, they even had sprite flickering.
Right, like that was even more close than Shovel Knight.
And kept 4:3. Like the resolution.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Like it just like in hindsight, it's like, why did we adhere to it so closely? I guess it's just like because it seemed like it was the right thing to do because we were trying to make a game that was like Nintendo.
Right.
But it's like, why wouldn't we make it like rotate? Like, why wouldn't we make like the arms rotate like into the gungeon? I guess just because it looks wrong, right? like it looks like it still looks wrong. Like if I've got my like NES glasses on and something like that happened, then it's like, like it takes you right out of it.
It's like an uncanny valley almost.
Yeah, and having that anchor was really helpful for just like making decisions and giving us a direction. There is a temptation to add more and like have more animation frames and have more guys on screen, but you kind of have to like have a consensus of where it's going to go and like have a general feeling for what the game should be. And having a framework like NES is really helpful for us to all get together and like have a group understanding of what it should be.
So you guys play a lot of games in this room, and I know you do sometimes theme streams, like David mentioned Super Marchio, and then sometimes Mega Man.
Right. Mega Man.
Yeah, Mega May. I was curious about more of those events. Is that something that you guys have streamed in the past, or is that just something you all do for fun just to kind of cut back?
Yeah,
we've done both variants. We've done like the private. We started off just doing it for fun, of course.
Right, like at Way Forward was like where Mega May used to happen. So it was like we like
down in the warehouse on the couch.
Right. Yeah. So like the Way Forward people that were excited about Mega Man would all gather up over there, and we'd play through all the Mega Mans.
They have like Mega Man contest to decide
like, draw
your own Robot Master, and then we all vote and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like a child's birthday party.
Yeah,
very much so. It's like
look, I got napkins with E-tents on
them.
them.
Like, like junky snacks and like play Mega Man, like marathon like 3 Mega Mans in one day.
Fueled by donuts.
And so we've also streamed some of those as well, but they're still like even the streams they're not. They're pretty laid back.
They're like very unprofessional.
We'd like to. We'll just like talk and like walk away from the monitor, like from the mic.
And it's like we're a half hour late every time.
Right.
I don't know. That's just like the way it goes. We're not. I mean, we've been so busy that we haven't really had time to stream a lot. But I think that'd be something that'd be really cool to do, especially in the future. Like. Just to have like a more regular streaming schedule where we get to where we can start to develop a narrative of what the hell you're actually watching when you're when you're looking at it, right?
Yeah, maybe have a schedule.
Yeah, I think it's like just like a bunch of like random nonsense. It's like it's like secret stream. Here we go, and then like there it is. Yeah. But it's still kind
better
of
than
fun.
Nothing.
Yeah, we had like for a while in the beginning, especially when we were doing Kickstarter streams, there was like a lot of like regular people that would come in all the time that we got to know. And we were doing like design, like we'd like stand in front of the whiteboard and do designs, and our Kickstarter backers were looking at us over stream for that as well.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of fun from I did some of those secret streams that seem just random, but while I'm playing like E4 or something like that, somebody jumps in the chat and they're like, Yacht Club, like I just want to say I just finished Shovel Knight this weekend and I loved it. Okay, bye, gotta go.
Right.
And so even just no, it's usually pretty positive, but usually it's cool to be like out there. It's like no different from like being at a PAX or being like having an inbox email that people know. It's like people are going to stop in to like talk about the game or talk about what we're playing, and so that's why I like doing those.
Yeah, I always do the pixel streams, and I would stream like what I was working on at the time, and like that's pretty as non-interactive as you can get, because it's just basically a screen.
Woz ignores you the stream.
Yeah, the stream. It's just a screen of like what I'm working.
Hey Woz,
on.
what are you working on? Shut up, I'm busy.
I mean, I would respond, but it was also like really helpful like when these guys would jump into the chat, and then I wouldn't have to respond for hours at a time, and I could just really focus. So yeah, it was like it's cool to have like that level of development exposed to people, because they don't get to see that very often. Besides just the game streams and like our thoughts on what games are, I think it's neat to have something that lets you describe to somebody why you're making a game the way you do, and like why each thought that comes into your head is something that you're thinking about.
How long
things more
take?
Magical and important than the last. I think game development was so opaque when we were coming up, that there was like, I don't know, like I wanted to make games and there's no way to even know.
Right. How does Zelda even happen?
Right. How does it? Yeah. How do you even make it? Right. Like I didn't like the reason I never wanted to be a game designer as a kid is because I didn't even know that was like a thing that people did. I thought
there was some contest or something that Sega ran a long time ago, or I forget who it was with, and it was like design your own video game, like get some ideas together or whatever, and like we'll judge it or whatever. And I went to my friend to figure it out, and I was like, hey, let's do this. And he was like, you can't make a game, that's impossible. And then he totally shut me down. And I was like, oh, and I had this like very limited ideas of what it could be, but yeah, like making a game was like it's like an impossible task that you don't know how to do, and so like we wanted to sort of break those barriers. I think even now it's difficult. Like we still try to do a lot of internships and having people come in and see what we're up to. And I don't know, like I was just going through like internship applications like the other day, and you can see how people have this
drive to create.
Yeah, it's like they want this knowledge of like how to make games, and even people that have like been to school for it like don't know. Like I didn't know, right? Like when I went to school, it's like it's so hard to make it coalesce into a real thing. I think just like any service that we can provide to help give people some insight into how games are made is like really important.
Yeah, I mean that's why we're excited to do like this book and like to this interview and all that. I mean we're hoping we can more regularly get information out there just about like what's happening. Even something like it's like, hey, aren't you guys releasing this new patch? It's like, yep. It's like, hey, it's been like a month. How come it's not out yet?
Because
it takes like we're working like this is all I'm working on for an entire month, and it's still not ready because of all the things that need to happen. And that's the same for any feature. It's like, are you guys still talking about armors for Specter Knight? It's been weeks. It's like, yeah, because they're not fun yet. Like until they're fun, we're going to keep talking about them. All these ideas and all these like steps of the process take a lot of time and a lot more time to get right. And so hopefully, like in little ways, we can help show like the amount of thought that goes into different areas of development.
You'll like no longer be bewildered why games take forever.
Right, you'll just be like a little sad.
So, at the risk of starting a civil war within Yacht Club, which is better, Mega Man 2 or Mega Man 3?
Oh,
2.
2?
I would say 2.
My first experience with Mega Man was Mega Man 3 on the Game Boy, and that messes up everything. like when I see Mega Man on the NES, I'm like, that character's so small and fits on screen so well. That's really weird. And that game also messes up the robot order. So I thought I liked 3, but I think I do like 2. Now that I've actually like played the NES versions of it.
Yeah, but Mega Man 1's the best.
No.
Wow.
I think 2 as well. I think the slide is like a little too crazy.
The slide's
for me.
fine.
It's like too crazy for me. I'm just like the limit of video games. I think maybe I'm just like bad at 3, but I think I do as well.
So what I find interesting about the 3 Shovel Knight campaigns so far is that each one zeroes in on a certain type of mobility. Shovel Knight is your classic run, jump, pogo platformer. Plague Knight is more difficult to control, but I think in a good way. It's kind of like, here's the expert god level tier for platforming challenges. And then Specter Knight is kind of in a league of his own, and I wonder if you guys could talk about, in terms of Specter of Torment, how did you arrive on Specter Knight's mobility? It's so fluid. I just love the way he flows. It's so fun to play.
I just want to say that if we should call King Knight's mobility nobility.
Nobility, yes.
In the future.
Nobility.
Yeah.
I get credit for that. In the book I write, I'll credit myself.
You want to speak to this
Yeah,
first.
like our design goals for Specter Knight were like after Plague Knight came out, it was way too hard for everyone, and nobody could do it.
We're sorry.
And everyone complained that it was too hard, and then we realized that it was really too hard.
Although
Yeah.
I like Plague Knight. I like playing as Plague Knight,
we all
especially
like Plague
playing
Knight.
like as we're like testing the game to go out. Like it's fun to play as Plague Knight. And I still stand by that.
And I
It's a
think,
learning curve.
and I think that you can approach, you can appreciate the levels in a different way, and like I don't know, it's Plague Knight's fun. Like I'm not saying I don't like
Good,
Plague Knight,
good,
but I'm
okay.
saying that people didn't like Plague Knight.
That's definitely true.
And so for Specter Knight, we wanted to make something where it would be easier, where like making it easy to be cool was like the guiding principle behind Specter Knight's mobility. And to do that, I tried to think about modern games and how we could integrate things from modern games into the side-scrolling mobility. So like in Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, when you jump up against a wall, then you walk like 2 or 3 steps up it, pause, and then fall down, just like Specter Knight. Mm-hmm. And then if you jump, then you jump all the way across. And then like okay, in Ninja Gaiden Black for Xbox, you can do a move called the Flying Swallow, which is like a homing move that goes down if you're above an enemy and up if you are below an enemy. And like all of those things.
What's this have to do with Specter Knight?
Yeah, all of those things are like sort of weird. Like they're sort of weird in 3D, but they're like problems that they solved because they were in 3D. Like for instance, like Sonic and the whole like homing like dash thing, which I think Specter Knight ended up being kind of like. So it was like let's try and integrate some modern stuff into Specter Knight because it'll be funny, and also make it easier for like players to play with this new mobility. And then also make it feel like a little bit like Ninja Gaiden, make it feel like you're a cool ninja that's like fast and furious.
Well, I mean, and also like Plague Knight involved just from what you have to do involves like a lot of buttons. Like
Yes.
Plague Knight, you have to hold down a button, and we saw like countless players struggle in the first screen of the game because holding B and then pressing A and releasing B was already like on the upper end of what we're asking of a player who's not familiar with doing that. And so for Specter Knight, we wanted to remove a lot of button presses for what you have to do. And so like a contextually aware button makes a lot of sense there. It's like you don't grab a wall by pressing jump when you're near it. You don't jump off the wall by pressing up by pressing jump. And the same goes for the attack. Like you can plan a route and execute it just by pressing like jump and then pressing attack at the right time. Right. And so that was also like fed in naturally to what we wanted to do.
A lower barrier to execution.
Right.
Yeah. And then the last thing was having a context sensitive move in the game, right? Because like Shovel Knight has like absolutely no context sensitivity, and like neither does Plague Knight, like whatsoever. Like context sensitivity is like the ruiner of gameplay, and so
Specter Knight.
Yeah, so Specter Knight, where it was like let's put one context sensitive thing
and
in
make
the
the
game
whole game about it,
and try and make it work, and try let's try and make the first context sensitive thing that's ever worked. And like I think, and like we worked really, really hard on it. It was I think it was like the hardest part of getting the game right.
For sure, the hardest.
Like it was like really the hardest part. And I think that overall, I'm like really satisfied with how it came out, and I think that it was very successful. Like I'm proud of the context sensitive / in Specter Knight. I think that's like a big victory for context sensitivity.
Yeah, I think it's a fun thing that once you know how it works, which you can learn entirely by doing it, it becomes second nature. It becomes very natural.
Yeah, you can
and it's
really
not something
feel it.
you're fighting. It's not something where you're like, oh, I can't believe it didn't do that. Like you can start really understanding why, like it's contextual based on height, and so you can understand why it's switching, and you're waiting for the switch to do it. Like you're waiting for the context switch to act upon it, rather than waiting for conflicting contexts to resolve each other. And I think that's what like makes it really work.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of what makes that work is the visual feedback of having that thing on the there's like we call it a tear. I think there's like flames that appear over the thing that you're going to dash at. And for a long time we didn't have that. For a long time we were trying to figure it out with just intuiting when you're above and
when Specter Knight would jump, he would like have his sight like this if a character is above, and he'd switch like this if he was below. But it turns out when you're targeting an enemy, you're not looking at Specter Knight, you're looking at everything that isn't Specter Knight.
Yeah, so it was difficult to just like to get the player to understand that on like a just like a game feel level, and so we added that pretty late in the game. But once we did, it it made things a lot easier, and we no longer were getting feedback like it's impossible to know what's going to happen. It was more like we're getting feedback like, oh, this is great, and it was like that was like the goal of what adding that in there was for.
And it's interesting too because you have those helping hands, so to speak, of being able to see the tear or the flame above or below to understand your angle, and how far, for example, Specter Knight will get knocked back if I dash at a gold armor and he blocks. But what I really loved while playing the game was I would get into later levels where I would see an orb far down the screen and something above it that I wanted to dash at. And so I'd go, okay, I need to jump at this orb, fall below it, and then dash. And even though there were these cues, I still felt awesome and empowered to be able to pull off those sorts of moves.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, that's still like what that scene isn't. Even if it's like placed with gems, that's still you doing that. That's still like something we're asking of you. It's like that's only a 1 second window where you have to press attack at the right time without like falling to your death, just like pressing jump before you reach the end of the collision and all that. So yeah, I think what really worked with Specter Knight is it is fun to do all these things, and it feels satisfying to like string them together or to see it play out.
It's a little bit easier, I think, just like to see the room ahead of you and know what to do. Like to see it, it's like you solve the room and then you execute on it. And that's something that you could do really well, I think, in Shovel Knight. And in Plague Knight, it's like much more difficult.
Yeah, it's much more question marks everywhere.
Yeah,
like,
you
what am I supposed to do?
by feel. Yeah.
Yeah, when you see, like, when you go into a side secret room or a Red Skull room or a Song Scroll room in Shovel Knight or Specter Knight, you see, like, the moving platforms, what you can and can't climb on, and, like, maybe a lantern. And, like, your brain is already, like, put down the path, right?
How do I
it's like, do this, and this. You're like, okay, like, now all I have to do is, like, actually execute on that.
Yeah.
And so that's a part of, like, feeling confident and feeling, like, good about executing something.
Nick, one thing I noticed right away when Specter Knight enters the planes, you can tell, okay, this is still the same planes of passage that I know, but it looks different and it feels different. As an artist, what was involved in changing up the color palette to strike that balance between this feels new but also somewhat familiar?
Yeah, we approached every level and tried to think of a way to make these levels feel as different as we were approaching them, because like the level design itself was changing. Every room was getting an overhaul. There was walls added because Specter Knight runs on walls, and there's new objects. The lanterns were a totally new thing, and so like roots of the same levels were changing, and different paths were happening. And so we wanted to make sure that the art was also adding something interesting as well. And so yeah, for example, the planes. It's very sunsetty, and like you can see the stars above, and that background was actually done by a guy named Alec. He's now at the time he was an intern, but he's doing really good. Yeah. And now he's a full-time hire. And
I mean, it also represents just like a step forward in terms of like the embellishment of the pixel art of Shovel Knight. Yeah. It's like if you compare the backdrop of planes for Shovel Knight with the backdrop of Specter Knight. Like Shovel Knight, if you don't remember, it's just light blue, and then there's like some dark blue lines that like kind of form a horizon. Yeah, and then Specter Knight's like an elaborate clouds of like majesty.
Yeah,
so it's kind of like us letting loose a little bit more, but also like enjoying.
There's definitely like a lot of just like, hey, I want to make a cool background, and like and then going like way more whole hog into it. Yeah, that I don't like bringing that up because I feel like kind of ashamed of that. Like I feel like I've strayed away from the NES's roots. But I don't know. It was fun, and it looks good, I think. But
I think it was important that the screenshots of the game all felt really different. Yes, no one could differentiate Plague Knight, I think, because it looks the same. But like when you see those screenshots and they look very different.
Then it's a new adventure.
Yeah,
it's like a new
really
game.
Helps. Yeah, it helps to sell like, hey, this is a new game. This is new gameplay. This is a new character.
It's set before it. Like this was all us learning from how Plague Knight went. Like on all counts, and nobody played Plague Knight. Like obviously Asterisk, Asterisk. Like lots of people played Plague Knight, but also nobody played Plague Knight. So we like, and part of that's like you see a screenshot and you see like the same like grass and dirt, and you're like, oh, it's like Shovel Knight. Whatever, I already played Shovel Knight, and you keep scrolling on like your list of games.
The first screen in Specter Knight has to be very different. Right. So it's like the palette is totally different. The ground he's on is like a slightly different green. The background is like a way different time of day. You can see the sun far in the background. It's a very different thing. So to Ian's point, it's like it's really important that we don't confuse anybody with what we're doing, making sure that like when you see screenshots, it feels like a totally new, totally different game.
Some of my favorite conversations with Sean, David, and Ian were about how everyone would get together, brainstorm a lot of attacks for each bosses, kind of cull out the stronger ones, and then the programmers would sit down and go, okay, how do I implement these attacks? What are the boss patterns going to be, or lack of a pattern? And so I wonder if David and Ian could speak to how you went about changing up the boss fights for Specter Knight.
Well, I mean, the big thing we were thinking about with these boss fights were essentially how do we make it be different enough that it's different,
right?
But also add no new art.
Asterisk. Without like. It shouldn't change the spirit of the fight. Like, Polar Knight's still a character that's going to be throwing snow at you. But if you're a player, you'll be able to identify what changed and what didn't. So we had a big spreadsheet, and we had a big meeting where we all talked about different ideas for what they could add. And it's like, oh, well, for this battle, maybe they'll, like, summon minions that you fight. And it's like, no, that's not, like, impactful enough. It's like, oh, maybe, like, I always thought this boss, like, Treasure Knight needs help hitting guys above him, so he should just be able to, like, swing his anchor up and hit you. And it's like, no, that's not different enough. Those are just, like, extra attacks you'd have in, like, a revision of Street Fighter or something like that. But it's not something that as a player, like, oh, man, I can't believe, like, the ground broke out. I can't believe the water was drained from the level. I can't believe, the robot moves forward now, and all these things. So that's, like, what we tried to focus on.
And a other big component to it is that we knew that you'd be able to choose any stage at any time.
Right.
So making sure things like King Knight, who was meant to be a very easy boss right from the start, because he's one of the first guys you run into, now has to be like balanced with everyone else. Right. So it's like, how do we make him harder? Oh, let's add pits or whatever.
How can like this end game boss be playable even if you only have 5 bubbles of health? Because that's a situation that could happen too. Yeah. And so it was kind of like a normalization of the boss patterns. In addition to, when we did the Specter Knight revisions, it was the same programmers that worked on the previous boss. And so it was kind of also like this part always bothered me with the boss, or like finally going to like fix up this exploit, or it's like he's not going to be a pushover this time, but Treasure Knight still is. So.
Black Knight was always supposed to ride a turtle, like ever since. Like, that's funny. That's very much like the Miyamoto like Yoshi story. It's like we always wanted to have him ride a dinosaur, but like we just couldn't do it. we wanted Black Knight to be riding a turtle, but like we just we didn't have the resources.
Because for Shovel Knight, you would flip him off the turtle, and like that.
Yeah, that was like the first idea.
It's like Shovel Knight has a shovel. The first boss, it should be a turtle you flip over.
He like charges at you and you flip him, and like you don't flip anything.
That.
You don't flip
Black
anything
Knight flips
in the whole
him.
game.
Black Knight flips the
turtle. Yes. I guess that's true. Yeah.
So the trick is to set your goals and then wander away from them. But like that was kind of let's finally do it. Let's give Black Knight a turtle.
Or just trying to have like smart uses of things where we could like the Propeller Knight battle is obviously like the Kratos battle where you're on platforms that are moving as you're trying to jump and like.
But lots of people don't know what the Kratos.
No one knows.
A big component of it was trying to integrate it more into Specter Knight's mobility, right? So like you like most of the boss fights, you will be wall climbing or dashing in some way that's different. Like Tinker Knight rises up on his gear, so he's like out of your range, and you have to dash slash him to get around him.
Or like the walls you have to climb.
Yeah, like the Propeller Knight battle is like that because then you'll be like wall climbing and platforming, the way you win in the stage.
The best example is before you fight Black Knight in the plains, he breaks out the ground so you fall into a pit because we needed like multiple walls. We need walls, and so him and Phantom Striker both do that where the ground breaks out because like we need walls. Sorry, that's like why it's happening.
So that was a big component, just thinking about how to integrate it. So we were making you use those new abilities you had as part of the battle, because otherwise you would just be fighting him like a normal fight, and it wouldn't feel like unique to the game.
Right.
Sean, I think I talked to all of you about storytelling in Shovel Knight, but I think you put it most eloquently when you said brevity is the soul of wit. You strive to keep the...
I'm pretty sure that I made that quote up.
That's you. That's totally you.
Let's talk about it for a long time.
I looked that up in Bartlett quotations and everything. That was you. But I was interested that Specter Knight storytelling takes a much larger role, and I think in a good way. I really liked exploring his background. Was this a conscious decision, like, hey, let's bring more story into the campaign this time around?
I would say that was definitely not a focus at all. This
was supposed to have as much story as any other campaign.
The script for Specter Knight is actually much shorter than that of Shovel Knight or Plague Knight, and it's because there's like fewer village NPCs and there's less like side story stuff. Yeah. Generally, what we'll do is we'll figure out the basics of what we want the story to be, and then we will create as many moments as we need in the game to adequately tell the story and no more. So it's like, from the very beginning, we're like, okay, there's going to be these 8 levels, and then you're going to have the tower, you're going to go back to the hub, here's where we can deliver the story. So if we have 8 stages and it's going to be taking this long, then we need like 3 sepia cutscene moments that need to be integrated in here, and they're going to be here, here, and here. And then like 3/4 of the way through the game, we're like missing one, right? And it's like, where should our like we need this extra cutscene. So I'd say we like portion it all out like that, and then we like fill in the blanks basically.
I guess, when did the idea come around to make the sepias playable? That was like pretty early on, right?
Just as we were talking about actually doing them, like that was a discussion that me, David, and Sean were having. It was like, let's figure out what the actual events are going to happen during the sepia thing, because we knew we wanted to deliver story. But our idea at first was just going to be a bunch of text bubbles and maybe like a camera pan. But as we talked about it, it just kept feeling more and more hollow of like what we wanted it to
boring.
Be. And boring.
It started being something you watch. And like that's like, we should have known from the beginning that was a dumb idea. Yeah. Like if you're watching something, then it's not a game.
Yeah. I mean that's sort of that's like how Shovel Knight campfire scenes evolved too, right?
Yeah.
It's like if this just happens the same way over and over again, then you're just going to want to skip it.
So like throw some enemies in there.
So let's like have the player at least be able to move around and take part in it. Let's have enemies show up. And the sepia scenes seem a little bit like a extrapolation of that too.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to go back to that time and like show you a bunch of dialogue.
Yeah. Well, they
might as well like fight someone too.
Yeah, they happen at the same cadence as the campfires, basically. So it's like,
it's weird because we didn't say like, here's his campfires, but they ended up being his campfires.
Well, when you have a game that has like the same basic structure or like the same levels, then it's like where the story is going to break down. It'll probably all be around.
That's probably like making a Mega Man. It's like, and then what happens at Dr. Light's lab now? What happens at Dr. Light's lab? 5 robots.
It's like something should like happen halfway through. I would say the story was like we just developed it alongside the content, just like anything else. Like I would say, like with the mobility sucked and the story sucked and the levels sucked, and then they all got like improved, and became awesome, just like everything, right? And like, but it's not like there was this amazing story from the get go. But
definitely not.
But we did. We started with the locket. Yeah, right. Well, we had nothing. We had the locket,
and we wanted it to be sad.
We said we want it to be sad. We want Specter Knight to focus on the locket, and we want it to be that.
The goal was that you would think about the locket when you were playing as Shovel Knight, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, he's just using this."
Yeah, I can't believe
important thing. Yeah. That was the whole idea.
It was to make you feel bad when you're Shovel Knight using a locket, because everyone uses the face locket all the time.
Yeah.
He's like, look at me.
Look what I found.
Right. But and then like we wanted to keep the levels like at least the same levels and the same bosses, and so that means that you would have to go, since you're going to the same places, why would you have to go there? And so we decided it would be a prequel, and you'd be recruiting the Order of No Quarter, which makes a lot of sense as Specter Knight anyway. Like that was very early on.
Yeah.
Like before we started on anything, it's like it's going to be a prequel.
Yeah.
You're going to be doing stuff for the Enchantress. Your hub is going to be inside the Tower of Fate,
right.
And you're going to access the levels in any order.
There's some lines that like alluded to Specter Knight's history, and so we wanted to explore a little bit of like what it means that the Enchantress preserves him. Like what does that mean? Like why is that happening? So
we had like 3 dialogue lines, and so it was like take all this and make something good out of it. Right. But I think that's what that's
fun. Yeah.
That's very much like what we're good at doing. I think it's like we can take these elements and put them in a blender, even if they're like weird, and then like work on them until they become something that's like a little bit more polished.
Yeah, where it's like I can't believe it would be any other way. Like this all makes so much sense. Like all the gameplay and all the story ties together.
Yeah. Right. It's like we thought of it like that from the beginning. Like that's how like a good thing seems, right? It's like, well, this was like it like came into existence just as like a whole thing.
But then you see Specter Knight's flyby scene in the original Shovel Knight where he's playing the potion game with Mona, and it's like, that exposes how little we thought about it. It's Mona and Specter Knight like hanging out for no reason.
We were talking about making like a side story that somehow set that up. Right. It's like
Mona's like, I know where the locket is, but you need to mix this potion 8 times. Like, okay, throw it in the air and I'll try to hit it 8 times.
Right. Yeah, I think it would be funny. Like, it's like, how do we get Mona, Super Skeleton, and Specter
and Grandma Swamp
all in the same?
But they're like, wait, we need somebody to count how many times you hit it. It's like Grandma Swamp is great at counting.
Yeah, right.
And then she was along for the ride.
Yeah.
I feel like that was the difference maker for me. Like, now that you mention it, I'm thinking back. I'm like, yeah, there was, I guess, less text in Specter Knight than the other campaigns. But the fact that I could play the flashbacks rather than sit there and more than likely skip through them, knowing me and my non-existent attention span, was just a really cool way to kind of blend that gameplay and story balance. You guys have always been really good at doing that. Like, here's some environmental clues in Shovel Knight for people who care about the story, but even if you're skipping all that stuff, you can still kind of pick up what's going on because of what you're playing and how it's unfolding.
Yeah, I mean, we want to provide background. We want to provide why the character, motivation for why the characters are doing things, context, world building. But we also want to, more than anything else, to play a game. And so
and it was also a good way to prove that Specter Knight and Luan were buddies. Like, they actually had an adventure together because they worked together.
You gotta go on the adventure,
and they actually you do things together in that level. And for a lot of that, and now that we're talking about it, I'm remembering that was a lot of the things we had to prove that they were adventures. They had adventures together, and we couldn't just do that with dialogue. You can't just say, hey, remember all those good times that we had? That was really great. Now let's have a story. It's you have to actually show that it happened and really convince the player that something actually important and meaningful happened in that interaction.
It's tough because that's we're telling a story outside of the current events of Shovel Knight for the first time, and we're introducing a character that straight up didn't exist before this, and so getting all that in there and making it all cohesive, it belongs in that world, was that was a big part of polishing it and making it feel like it was proper.
I think a big component to it too is just thinking about how different people play games, right? You could be a person that skips all the text and don't care, but you still might want to get joy out of the story and the world building, even though you're not into reading. Or you could be a 6-year-old that's playing the game and can't really read to begin with. I played
hard, so they
I played Zelda and Mario without being able to read. So being able to go through those games and sort of understand at least the feelings that are getting across.
Luan's your buddy.
Luan's your buddy, and when you see him fall, you're you have some feelings attached to him just by playing with him. I think that's
and you also kind of know that the character you're playing is Specter Knight. There's a connection because you control the same way,
right?
And so instead of just saying this is me in the past, the player feels that it's this is the past.
Is definitely me in the
past.
That's
definitely the same character.
Or in the future where colors have gone away.
Some side time.
Yeah, or even if you are reading it, but you don't you're not understanding it what you're reading correctly, right? You might miss a line,
skipping it,
or you don't when you read a book and you read one page and then you go to the next page. You're what was on the last page?
Go back.
I gotta go read that again.
It's 30% of all pages. It's the worst.
Yeah, I think that happens all the time, and accounting for that outside of the dialogue is really important.
Yeah, I remember when we brought everyone in to play the game, and they all gasped at the critical moment in the Specter Knight story. It was we're doing an okay thing here, right? It's because you can get it without needing it,
right? A big thing we had to change, I remember, was when you went back to the locket spot, it wasn't in sepia ever. It was only sepia scenes when you went to the sepia scenes, and making sure you got having to change the visuals so you would understand the dialogue,
right, where you're going
and what would happen, and how the time worked in it, and that having it always be in sepia when you went to that locket scene made you understand, like, oh, he's reflecting right now on
he's
his
thinking
past.
about the past.
Even if you're not playing it, you kind of get an insight into what he's thinking about.
When you say return to the CPU, you mean when he's at the tower and it's
Right,
it's gray.
and it's in
sometimes you press A and it like comes back to color and you go on your adventure, and sometimes it fades to like the past.
Yeah.
Right.
That kind of
transition.
Yeah, that makes good sense.
Good idea.
Good idea.
We should do that.
Yeah. I think we're also very aware of the player's time being wasted. I think because a lot of us are also like very impatient when it comes to having our time wasted in a game, and so we try to mitigate that everywhere, like as harshly as possible. Right? It's like we have.
Unless it's a dance.
You can unless we're really
then attendance is mandatory.
Unless we're really wasting your time on purpose. Yeah. And but when we do that, like, you'll know it. Yeah.
Although even for that, it's like the dance. The music's like 2 minutes. Like, no, we need this down to like 60 seconds.
That's true.
Anything else is like too long.
Yeah. You can't watch 2 minutes. Of
I know. That's what I'm saying. But but you're saying like making sure that it's all snappy and.
Like you can skip everything. Like when you're feeding Manny the gold, you can skip it. Like you can skip everything. Like that's really good because when you're playing through that game for the millionth time, then you can skip all that stuff and just like get to the core of the meat of the gameplay, which is probably what you're replaying. Yeah, that's probably why you're replaying it anyway. Yeah.
Well, to kind of bring things to a close, you guys mentioned that you just recently sat down and were trying to peer into your crystal ball, see 5 years in the future. I wonder if there are any teases you can give us as to what's next, particularly in regard to everyone's favorite decadent dandy.
Well, hopefully King Knight is done in less than 5 years. That's definitely my hope.
The best tease we can give is that in Specter Knight's campaign, there are allusions to what his campaign will be about.
Yes.
So if you can pick up on those very subtle, small details,
but you'll still be confused.
Yeah, you'll still be confused.
Even once you know everything, you'll be confused.
Yeah. But yeah, I would say we're thinking about how to like majorly change it up for King Knight. Because we figured you've gone through this campaign
3 times.
Yeah. Well, that's what we think about a lot during the design process. It's like for Shovel Knight, when it was Plague Knight's turn, it's like, okay, what would make it exciting to go through a second time? And that's like visiting the places, but they're slightly different because you're being treated differently as a character and you have different motivations. And that's like the armor outpost, like you're not allowed in, like the village you're not allowed in, things like that. And for Specter Knight, it's like, okay, what would, like now you're playing it for the 3rd time, what would be exciting? It's like not seeing the same level map was like one of the first things we said, like not doing like a boss rush or not having like
seeing the exact same
these
levels.
staples, not having the same levels
going
or
somewhere
abilities.
new,
right?
Getting rid of something that's like annoying that was in the previous one,
right?
And
so it just doesn't feel like you're doing like the same Shovel Knight things over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think King Knight is going to further exemplify that. It'll be a further step towards like you're back for the 4th time. Here's something new.
Right, yeah, here's something familiar that you love. Like it is Shovel Knight, isn't it? Feel like it's part of the same game. But like we're gonna do something that makes it so that you're hopefully not just like you don't get to that sense where you turn on like, oh, I have to do this whole thing again, like another 8 levels. Like we don't want people to like ever feel that way. So it's like you'll experience it in a way that's unique to King Knight.
Yeah, it'll be something fresh and new that you'll love.
Yeah,
that's what.
It'll be perfect.
Look forward to that.
If somebody from the far off future plays Shovel Knight for the first time and sees all of these campaigns and they're like, I'm going to 100% Shovel Knight, they're going to be in for one cool ride.
You shouldn't be annoyed.
You should be like, it's like, I'm set for what this is. Too.
And battle mode is going to be really cool too. Like the 4-player battle mode, which we're already like pretty far along on. I'm excited to like jump into that and try to get that like really fleshed out and finished as well.
Yeah, that's pretty fun.
But we're also talking about games far outside of Shovel Knight too. Like we want to try new genres or different worlds and try to build them up to be them like just as great or if not greater than.
We're starting to work on a brand new thing. A whole brand new not Shovel Knight thing.
New brand.
Yeah, so get excited for that too.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time, guys, not only today, but for the past several months. I hope you're looking forward to reading the book, and thanks again for talking today.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm only going to read the chapters that these guys said, though. I don't want to.
Yeah, thank you so much for like joining us alongside and like spurring this whole thing and kicking it off. It's been really cool.
It's going to be a cool book.
My pleasure. We'll see if you say that again once you read it, but my pleasure.
Oh man.
No, it'll be good.